ADHD Entrepreneur Podcast. Join me, your host, Lawrence Pratt, on a wild ride into the world of online business. I've traded a comfortable day job for a 12-month challenge of trying to create financial freedom and passive income from print on demand, self-publishing, affiliate marketing, online courses and consulting, whilst at the same time learning how to cope with a new diagnosis of ADHD. Each week, I will be exploring the highs and lows amidst a sea of distractions and unfinished business, as well as talking to and gaining insights from other ADHD entrepreneurs. So please subscribe to the ADHD Entrepreneur wherever you listen to or watch your podcasts. Now enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode. You'll notice that I'm not in my usual setting. I am here at Wormwood Scrubs. No, I haven't been arrested and sent to prison. Those of you listening in the UK, you'll know that it is actually the location of a pretty high-profile prison. But it's actually, Wormwood Scrubs is the name of this huge set of playing fields and woodland and nature reserves. This is where I have come to take Coconut, my dog, furry friend of the show. You see him? Out for a long walk. The relevance of this is because before I left my job, my colleagues were asking me, what is it that you're looking forward to most about this new life you're going to be leading? And I repeated that the thing I'm looking forward to most is taking Coconut for long, muddy walks whenever we please. Because that's what I imagined I would leap into doing. I would all of a sudden become this person that rose early, took the dog out for a walk before anything else, so that I was pumping full of nature's dopamine and ready to tackle the day ahead. And what do you know? The reality is, this is the first walk we've been on in a muddy, open setting. I tend to follow the old habits of just taking him a walk around the block, which is boring for us both, to be honest. But anyway, it's also led me on to this week's topic, really, and that is reflecting on how, since I've started this new project, how I've been managing my ADHD throughout this process and reflecting on that. Because I think last week's episode, because it'd been a while because of the Christmas break, I think it was, on reflection, it was rather full of details about things that I'd done inside the projects, which, unless you guys listening are doing similar projects, it might not have been really that interesting from an ADHD point of view. So I felt that this week's episode should actually probably focus a little bit more on just how coping and dealing with trying to manage the ADHD. As you can see, as I've explained, the walking aspect, although I had planned to do that, I haven't really done, but we're here now, and that's good. So we may find ourselves on one or two more of these walking podcasts in the future. As well as that, I said, I think exercise as well. I haven't really dived into that too much. I booked myself a PT instructor, and I had 3 sessions one week, and then realized that I couldn't necessarily afford to keep that up at that frequency. So I'm now doing one a week for the next month. I haven't really done much exercise other than going to the gym on the PT days. So that's something, again, that I thought I was going to become this superhuman fit athlete once I had all this time and freedom to do those sorts of things. But the reality is, I haven't done those things. So, yeah, that's something I need to figure out or get on and do, to be honest. Figuring out is probably the key to why I'm not doing any of these things, because I just need to get on and do it. But I think part of that is scheduling. I still haven't got into the habit of creating a structured list of tasks that need to be done and organizing those into times of the day when those will be the most optimal to do them. I still haven't figured out what time of day I function best at. And I think if I'm going to be making excuses for myself, I did think to myself that I wasn't going to jump into scheduling my time immediately. I think I was going to figure out and reflect on what times of day I felt that I had the most energy and then start scheduling. But if I'm honest, that sounds like a procrastination excuse. And again, I should probably just get on and do it. This week, though, I did to talk about scheduling and task planning. At the weekend, I had one of those nights where I couldn't get off to sleep. And the only thing that helped really was by writing a list of the tasks that I needed to do that were floating around in my head. And that was quite helpful. I managed to get off to sleep about 1:30 in the morning after I'd written this list. And that gave me a bit of a structure to this week. So Monday came around and I tackled the tasks that I'd set for Monday and I flew through them. And I thought to myself, blimey, this is what it's all about. I need to always create myself a list of tasks to do for the week. And Bob's your uncle. This ADHD thing is conquered. But we get to Tuesday and the nature of those tasks were slightly different. So the tasks from Monday were all they weren't very taxing on the cognitive processes. I didn't really need to think about them. It was just a lot of repetitive editing tasks. So it was fairly easy and I was able to focus and fly through them. But on Tuesday, one of the tasks I needed to do was to write an about page for the new online store that I had launched. And I hit a brick wall. And I had a little think about why that might be. And I think we've got this fear of sharing, not personal information, but I understand the irony of saying I've got a fear of sharing whilst recording a podcast about my week. This podcast is indeed a way of me trying to overcome that and force myself out of that habit. But anyway, I was faced with it on Tuesday. I really didn't want to write this about page and tell people why they should be buying things from the shop because of who I am and what I do and why I do it. And that got me thinking, I think it was possibly because it was to do with authenticity, really. Now, I'm not saying that what I'm doing is not authentic or I'm trying to, in any way, what's the words I'm looking for? I don't think I'm trying to lie about what I'm doing. I think that because of my ADHD tendencies, it means that I've not got a split personality. That's taking it too far, but I feel like there's lots of different versions of me that has lots of different interests. And when you try and isolate one of those things, and because that's what it's to this case, in this case, it was for the online store where, because my graphic design past, it's all about illustrating and doing fun illustrations and putting those on, printing those on products and stuff. And I don't know, it just felt that just isolating that one thing didn't tell the whole story about me. And in that sense, I was just worried that about feeling authentic or getting comfortable with saying to people, this is who I think I am. This is what I actually feel like I am, and sharing that with people. So I wonder if you guys have anything that resembles that, because you have many interests due to moving on from different tasks and projects all the time. Does that play with your sense of identity and who you are? And how do you overcome that? Do you find it easy to just try and explain to people what it is that you're doing, or your purpose, or what drives you? So anyway, that was one of the things that really hit home. I think I need to work on maybe trying to write a bit of a backstory and get comfortable with talking to people about it. And so another thing that cropped up this week, I went back onto LinkedIn, and for the purposes of this podcast, I decided to start a group page for this podcast. And the reasons for that were so basically, if you're listening to this, you can join that group and we can discuss topics. You can share topics that you want to be discussed on the podcast. And if you are an entrepreneur and you want to discuss how you cope with your ADHD, then that'll be the perfect place to contact me, and we can discuss coming on the show and having interviews. But anyway, during the process of doing that, I hit another brick wall. And I guess it was what came over me was a fear of sort of sharing about ADHD. And it was wondering how that might affect future prospects of employment. The reason why that thought crossed my mind is because I'm very new to this. I haven't really experienced how employers deal with ADHD. I've had no experience of that because, as I mentioned earlier episodes, it was only during my 3-month resignation period that I discovered I had ADHD. So there really was no time to sort of experience how my company would deal with that to make life easier for me, or to really just understand it more. So without really knowing how employers today are coping with that and making life easier for ADHD people, I don't really know how well it will be perceived to talk about it in an employment setting, because obviously LinkedIn is hugely used for recruitment. And do employers just think that it's a bit of a hassle? Will they look down on somebody with ADHD, or will they recognize the specific benefits that they might bring? So again, I would love to know from you guys what experience you had in the past about employers being helpful or unhelpful, and whether you've actually come up against difficulties that you haven't been able to overcome, which obviously, let's face it, the name of this podcast is ADHD Entrepreneur, which suggests you could look at the word entrepreneur and the subtext there is unemployable. I know that the reason why I chose to work for myself is because of struggles of trying to fit into like the rigid structure of working for somebody else. I did listen to a very interesting ADHD podcast this week, Overcoming Distractions, I think it's called. And they were talking about Gretchen Rubin's book called The Four Tendencies. Now, this book is not specifically about people with ADHD, but it's the four tendencies are a bit like one of those Myers-Briggs personality test things that everybody found interesting a few years back. And so on this podcast, they were discussing how well you could look at ADHD and figure out which one you were. But it's more a case of how, if you have one of these particular tendencies, how you then relate to other people in the workplace that may have a different tendency, and how that can cause, I suppose, ultimately, how it causes friction, how it's perceived by both parties, and looking at ways in which you can understand that better and overcome them. The four tendencies were upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. I think the upholders were people that didn't really need anybody else's instruction. They just got on and did all their tasks. I suppose the opposite to that pairing would be the questioners, who, when given a set of tasks, they don't get on with it straight away. They cannot start it until they have fully understood it and asked loads of questions. And I think those two as an opposing pair, they cause some friction because the questioners need to ask all the questions. And if you're asking questions of the upholders, their natural state is to just get on and do it. So they can't understand why you can't get on and do it. And then that causes frustration between those two. The obligers are people that are motivated to do things for other people and not necessarily ignore doing things for themselves. But then that has trouble with prioritization, because you can get distracted by things that other people ask you to do, and you do those immediately, but then don't actually get on with the things that are most important. And in contrast to that, those are the rebels, who, I'm right in saying, is that they tend to not do anything that anybody else wants them to do, and they just go their own way and tend to rub people the wrong way. But they maybe are truer to themselves. That's just a little quick summary of what that podcast was about. And I found that really interesting. And I think that's really important for understanding how relationships work in the workplace. If you want to listen to that, overcoming distractions. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that. But yeah. Anyway, I did set up the group page on LinkedIn. So please do, if you're on LinkedIn, head on over to that and join it and get in touch and give me some ideas for topics that you want to talk about. And I think more importantly, reach out and let's have a chat. I do want to reflect on some wins this week. So I finally managed to do some video posting for social media. So I got into some video editing software for just doing little funky promotional videos. That's a fun thing I like to do. So I felt good about that. I figured out how to set up a Facebook and Instagram shop so that I can actually, when social posting, I can actually link to those product items. So that took a little bit of a faffing about with to get figured out, but that's done now. So I feel now that I can get on and do that quite easily now. So that feels like some progress. I had a little bit of research. Last week I was talking about marketplaces, and that really I wanted to be making sure that I was marketing to the US market. And for me to do that on Etsy, I figured out that I need to duplicate lots of products and then set a specific shipping profile and production partner for the US so that those products really are accessible to that marketplace. So that's going to require quite a bit of work, but I think that's going to be really worthwhile. For that, another little win that I am quite proud about is I reached out to someone to set up an interview for the podcast. So I will, in a few weeks' time, you might see an interview episode coming up. So I'm quite proud about that and excited and looking forward to having a chat episode. And what else? Oh yes, speaking about chatting with people, I've been doing, since I have started this, I have been doing something called the Lunch Club. And Lunch Club is essentially an online call, video call, where you get paired up with someone with similar interests and you just have a 45-minute chat about whatever. It's a bit, I suppose you could say, it's a bit of peer-to-peer mentoring, bit of inspiration, and obviously networking. And I think that it has been really valuable for me, I suppose, because I'm forced to verbalize what it is that I'm doing now. And as I was saying, getting more comfortable with telling people and describing what it is that I'm doing. And the positive thing has been the feedback from that. I think in the past, when I've thought about these as side projects, you get to the point where you're probably writing the about page and you just think, oh, you sound like an idiot. The imposter syndrome kicks in and you just think, no. So it's been really helpful to chat to lots of people and get positive feedback. And it does, and I think for a solopreneur, you can miss out on that workplace interaction. So it's good for that as well. I had a very interesting chat this week with a guy who, when we first started chatting, before we chatted, I didn't know what it was that we would have in common. And you do wonder whether it's going to be a productive chat. But it turned out as we got chatting that we were in many ways trying to do similar things. And again, that's quite validating for me to say, oh yeah, I'm not the only one that is trying to do this. And yeah, I got a lot from that chat. He really helped me look at talking about myself, the about page that I struggled with this week. He basically told me what I should write. From what I said to him, he was able to reflect back to me and say something that I was like, oh, wow, that sounds great. So I did find it really helpful. And I suppose really that's what I would like to see come out of this podcast really, and the LinkedIn group that I've set up. I would like to think that there would be a space for people to be able to connect with each other and talk about their experiences and be able to just get some feedback on their own journeys and be able to feel motivated to keep going. There was some other developments this week. For some reason, I ended up downloading a lot of apps to my phone for the purposes of managing the online store and the social media channels and social media posting scheduling. Yeah, there was an influx of downloading apps. I also had to, in order to sell on Google, I needed to create a business phone number for the purposes of customer services. So I needed to download an app for that as well because of call forwarding and things like that. So now I found that I have got like about five or six apps open all the time that I'm checking to see the progress of things. And I suppose I'm a bit worried about what that will lead to. On the one hand, I want to be on top of things and productive, and I want to be able to deal with customer service things if and when they arise. But I don't want to get caught in this trap of just looking at my phone all the time and being distracted. So that is something I am going to need to address. I think also one of the main purposes of the Amazon KDP and the print on demand was the idea that this would be creating some recurring revenue and not necessarily set and forget, but it would be something that people wouldn't be paying me for my time on that. So yeah, creating a customer services phone number did set off a little alarm bell of fear in my head with thought that I'm going to be dealing with returns or shipping or things like that. So I am going to need to, at some point soon, I think I am going to have to look at getting some sort of assistant for managing certain tasks and maybe some sort of hey ho. I haven't had any customer service calls yet, so that is not a problem yet. I need to sell some things first, get some customers before I have some customer service issues. So yes, I would be interested to know how you guys manage your phone health, your phone hygiene. Is that a word? Is that a phrase? Yeah, I'd be interested to know how you manage that. I don't yet know how I'm going to deal with that, but the problem hasn't arisen for yet. To watch this space on that. So yeah, I think that's really all I've managed to do this week. Coconut has just discovered that there's an Alsatian to perhaps chase. I don't know if that's a good idea. Yeah, you go and wee on the goalpost. Anyway, thank you for listening. I think I've reached the rambly part. It's hard to believe that it hasn't all been a ramble, but I think we're getting to the point now where I could completely stop making sense and get off topic. So anyway, what do I want you to do? Just go to the group on LinkedIn, join it, and say hello. Okay. Speak to you next week. Bye. Who's a muddy boy? You are, Coconut. Someone's gonna need a bath when we get home. You don't look too pleased about that. All right.